Well, this is another thing with all the redevelopment that's going on in Providence. They really have a good opportunity to make it a livable city. They can make it, one of the most livable cities in the country. It's a very small metropolitan area. There's like 18 square miles in Providence, and it's pretty well connected to the urban communities that surround it as well. So just a few different planning choices, just making our streets more complete can really do a lot. And that doesn't even cost a lot of money. Restriping our roads so that we're not favoring the automobile is a low-cost improvement, but it will make a ton of difference for the people who are walking and biking. So the more we can build connectivity whenever we're doing, we're not building too many new roads, but whenever we're going in and working on the old roads, always making bicyclists and pedestrians a priority, we can improve the transportation system hugely. And we can get people out of their cars, save people money, increase their health. It's a great policy, and a lot of policymakers are jumping on board. I've talked to a number of planners around the state, and they're all on board the idea of complete streets. You see proposals out there. The city has proposed some great things for Tiger grants with pedestrian bridges and with cycling amenities. And so we've got good leadership on this issue. We are going to see this stuff start to happen. One of the things that I think would be great that I mentioned earlier is a bike sharing program. They've done a feasibility study for that for Providence. And, for $1 million investment, it looks like we could have, a good start, like 200 bikes, 10 stations around the city in good areas. And that's good for residents. It's also good for tourists, especially when we have, the Blackstone Bikeway coming into the city, going down to the East Bay bike path. There's just a lot going for alternative transportation.
You said that a greater number of people do not own or have access to a personal automobile in Woonsocket. So that leads you to suppose that there is an economic factor. So how do you see the economic justice part of the picture, having access to employment that's not, that's further than just a casual walk away?
Well, we know that owning and maintaining a car is expensive. The price of gas is higher than it's ever been before. But what we also know is that walking is an accessible and affordable mode of transportation. So I think raising awareness about the benefits of walking as a means to, as a means of active transport, and then also to connect to other forms of transportation is very important here in the city of Woonsocket. I mean, elderly and those with disabilities excluded, there's no reason why we can't walk more to where we're trying to get, the grocery store, the doctor's office, as long as they're in a walkable proximity. Using walking as a mode of transportation is a great way to be able to function and not face the expenses of having a personal vehicle.
I've found that some other bike paths have had similar challenges like that, trying to overcome that perception.
This is just a recreational
just something
resource.
You do on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a challenge, but I think for us, the bike path, this greenway is not totally off-road. So it is, I think people do see, and we know there are people that use the bike path to commute, the greenway. And it's off-road and on-road, so it's kind of, and it is a challenge for us to really promote it as a total recreational resource for families. I think that's a challenge, when I think one of the questions about a challenge, it's like to get regular, the everyday person using alternative transportation, a challenge often is safety. I've talked to tons of people that love bike riding, but they're nervous about riding on a street. And our bike path, our greenway, it's both on-street bike lanes and then off-road, super safe, paved, lovely, in the woods, great recreational resource. But I think that's a challenge, is getting the everyday person to feel comfortable that they can share the road, and getting drivers to recognize that bikes really do belong on the street and we should share the road. So I think that's definitely a challenge that we have here in the Northeast because it's new. Roads are tight. Drivers are still thinking, get on the sidewalk. And it's like, no, bikes don't belong on the sidewalk. We belong in the street and we have to work together. So I think it's a big challenge.
Just to be clear, this particular service adjustments is one of the toughest choices I've had to make in a long time. This is not the first time I've adjusted service, but this one is particularly painful for me because, one, I couldn't figure out why people were so angry about the changes that we are proposing. I've been here, when we started looking at these service adjustments, I've been here not even 6 months. Still trying to understand the lay of the land. But the outcry was so loud that it kind of made me pause and wonder why. I mean, all we are doing is adjusting service. There got to be something else. And then, through questioning, because the cry was so loud, it just cannot be the service adjustment. There got to be something else. So when I started prodding, I found out we have been systematically reducing service year in, year out. And we've gotten to the point where there's nothing else to cut because every time we've gone to that table and they said, okay, we'll give you $2 million this year. Yeah, you short formula, we give you $2 million. We will do a $2 million adjustment. The same thing happened the year after that. So I went back and my staff told me, Charles, actually, we've held 28 public hearings, including the one that we held this year. And each public hearing had between 2 and 19% adjustment in service just to make ends meet. That's why people are screaming so loudly because, at this point, there's nothing else to cut. So every little adjustment is painful to the individual. So with that knowledge, we started backtracking. We had to, because I'm going, this is not fair. Now that I'm beginning to understand the plight of the individuals and why I'm the biggest, meanest human being that ever lived, it's beginning to make sense to me. So I said, okay, we came back and I directed staff, can we find some other ways to minimize service and mitigate for some of the impact on the individuals? And we started looking at it, and that's when we came up with the frequency adjustments as the way to go rather than just cut out communities and, in terms of reducing the span of time, and some of the communities will lose service altogether. So did I want to do that? No, I don't want to do that. No, there's no way we want to do that. However, if the board is not going to allow me to deficit spend, and the state, our elected officials are not going to give me enough money to fund the deficit, what am I supposed to do? So the only thing I could do that is within my power is to find ways to minimize the impact on the riders by finding some other way, creative way to adjust these services and still meet the budget deficit.
What, in your mind, because you've been so involved with the new availability of the acreage from the removal of 195, what in your mind, what would be the perfect or the ideal transit infrastructure in place for that serves that area?
Well, excuse me, I have terrible allergies.
That's okay.
I think we'd love to see a pedestrian zone somewhere in downtown. So a part of the city where we don't have any cars at all. And it would be great to see the streetcar running through that. If we don't get the streetcar, maybe have that zone be only accessible to public transit vehicles, buses, the little trolleys they have. Something like that. They've done similar things in New York near Times Square, made that a pedestrian zone. And it's been great for the city, for New York City. I think we can really emulate a lot of the things that New York has done, although we obviously aren't going to have a huge subway system, which is nice. So I think that's one of my goals, to see a dedicated place for pedestrians, and beyond that, we want to just see streets that are being shared by cyclists and cars. We want to see car drivers who are respecting cyclists, and vice versa, because I think a lot of cyclists don't necessarily follow the rules of the road now either. And that's going to be not even an infrastructure thing, you know, that's sort of an educational thing. But you do want to let motorists know that bicyclists have a right to be on the road. It's a public space for people to get places, and cars and bikes are both modes of transportation. So I want to see where the streets are too narrow to have a bike lane. We have sharrows on the road, just to let people know that there are going to be bikes there. I think where we have schools, we really want to emphasize safety for obviously our kids to get to school, and we can do that in a number of ways, but definitely highlighting the crosswalks, you know, using lights, maybe decreasing the number of crosswalks, but really emphasizing the ones that are there. And there's a lot we can do in that regard. Let's see. Like I said, I think the bike sharing going in as well, you could really see, honestly, what I'd love to see us move towards is something like we see in Stockholm or, you know, Copenhagen. You know, just roads that are public spaces, shared by everybody. We don't need to be zipping around Providence at 35 miles per hour. It's a small city. You're going to get there on time. You don't have to kill anybody.
With Providence being such a small, like you said before,